Now, to give you a little background, the way our company got started is that back in the 70s, the founders of our company, George and Linda Pransky, were newly married, had a really rough relationship, and their relationship made this dramatic and surprising turnaround. Now, they owed their turnaround to something that they'd learned. So after seeing how much what they had learned helped them, they started seeing couples out of their living room and teaching all these couples what they had learned. And it seemed to work no matter what the issues, how messy the relationships were. These relationships just were improving left and right. Now, for George and Linda, what that looked like, and they saw this in a lot of couples, is that there was just less finger pointing, less blaming. They stopped looking at everything that was wrong with the relationship and the other person. And what happened is they essentially started learning about the fundamentals of a good relationship. And as they learned, their typical patterns just started to fall away. So the judgment, the resentment, and the doubt that they usually lived in disappeared. They appreciated each other again. The enjoyment, the inside jokes came back. So what happened for George and Linda and their clients is that there was this shift inside of them, and their whole orientation to each other changed because they were going about things differently. It just didn't make sense to do what they'd been doing anymore. And not only does it work, but it lasts. It's 35 years later. They're still happily married. Now, we know this from personal experience because not only are Kara and I their business partners, but we're also their two daughters. So we watched all of this happen when we were kids. We remember the constant arguments, the crazy amounts of household tension. We saw them go through this complete 180-degree turn, and we watched hundreds of couples come into that living room all distant and bitter, and then leave softer and nicer and getting along. So what we do here works. We've been watching it, and we're going to give you a little flavor of that today. So what I'm going to be talking about here is what happens when your partner or your significant other gets into one of their moods, and how you don't have to get whipped around by it right along with them. So the people that we spend a lot of time with, whether you're married or dating, once that exciting new relationship phase settles down, you start to see both their highs and their lows. And it's the lows, obviously, that can be the challenge. Everyone has them. I don't care who you're with. They all look a little different. Call it a bad state of mind or a particular way that they get that's not pleasant. I'm saying it's one of their moods. That's how it looks to me. If you're part of someone's life, you're spending time with that side of them. And maybe they're like that most of the time. We're all a little rough around the edges. We all have a certain way of being that makes us harder for people to be around us. I have certain ways I can be. You do too. If you can't see yours, ask a couple of friends that know you because they've had to find their way around it. Now, in your significant other, here's just a few examples of what I'm talking about, what this might look like. And maybe they get snitty or uptight, defensive, withdrawn, negative. Maybe they get really negative. They get critical. They find fault with everything they come across. They get arrogant or condescending. So I'm going to be calling that a bad state of mind. You can use your own word for however your partner gets. I'm sure you all know it well by now. And if not with the person that you're with, then the last couple people that you were with. So the highs and the lows in your partner's state of mind is normal. It's likely always going to be there to a certain degree, and that you can't change. But let's talk about what you can do. Now, there's a cycle that we see that might be the biggest common denominator problem that we see in couples. And here's what it looks like. One person gets into one of their moods, gets the way that they can get. They're being snitty, critical, negative, whatever. Their partner engages with it. Their partner ends up in a bad mood. And then they fight. And then they both feel worse. What I'm going to be suggesting is that people can step out of that cycle or not even get into that cycle in the first place, no matter what their partner is doing. So that scenario, that cycle is really, really common, and it's the source of and oftentimes a source of the majority of the tension that happens. Is just that pattern over and over again. So what I'm going to be suggesting here is that you don't have to jump in there and snowball and have it snowball the way that it does. Now, here's why I say that. It may not look like this at first, but the people around us in truth, cannot make us feel anything. So how we feel, whether we're happy, sad, stressed out, is happening inside of us, in our thinking. The only way someone around you can affect you is through your thinking. So professional athletes know that because opponents will try to taunt them and make them doubt themselves so that they lose their confidence. Now, taunting only works if the athlete lets them into their head. It's like a bank account. Someone can't take funds out of your bank account, even if they have a check, without your signature. Back when they used checks. And so you have to let somebody into your head. Now, just to show you another side of this, positive feelings work the same way. So there was this woman in the line at the grocery store in front of me yesterday, and she had the cutest little baby, and the baby was smiling at her, just this huge smile for like a solid minute. Well, the woman was running through her grocery list. She didn't even notice that was the baby was. I was totally into it, so I felt fantastic. But it didn't affect her. It didn't affect her mood. There's all this like love and joy and cuteness happening. She didn't see it, so it didn't affect her. Even though it was directed at her, it still didn't affect her. So it has to be, what happens for you can only happen inside your mind. That's the way it works, and through thought. Now, if you're in a bad mood and someone tries to cheer you up, it only works if you let them. So what even though we're in the world with other people, how we feel is decided by what we're doing inside of our own minds, not what's happening around us. So we're walking around in a world of our own thoughts. So taunting or a smiling baby cannot affect your own little world unless your thinking goes there. Now, there's this belief out there, it's really common, that negativity is contagious, all right? Now, people have drawn that conclusion that if someone's negative, it can spread. Now, it can look like it's something that happens to us and we have no power, but what I'm saying here is that despite appearances, negativity doesn't happen that way. So let me give you an example. So Greg and Michelle were a couple that were out here to work with us. And Michelle is talking to me, and she's saying, well, Greg comes home from work and he's in one of his moods. So for him, he gets really hot-tempered, he gets hostile. She'll ask him something and he'll either ignore her or is really short with her. And oftentimes what ends up happening is he'll kind of skulk around the house quietly, but inside she can feel him and kind of see him festering and stewing about things. And all of a sudden he'll lose it. It's like a time bomb. At some point, he'll just come unglued about something or someone. So for example, instead of sitting down for dinner with Michelle and the kids, he'll go play in the back room and play video games. And inevitably, he'll lose his temper while he's playing. And there will be this explosion of kind of anger and shouting, and she can count on it. So no matter what he's doing. So even when he's in the back room, this bad feeling, it just emanates through their house around whatever activity he's doing. So if he's making a sandwich, he'll be saying things like, who left an empty mayonnaise container in the refrigerator? And he's just getting into it with whoever's around. So he'll walk around in that state, just kind of broadcasting this negativity and irritation. Now, have any of you guys out there seen the Charlie Brown cartoon specials with Snoopy and Woodstock? Maybe it's just something that happens here in the US. So there was this character on there who, for some reason, was always really dirty. His name was Pigpen. And everywhere he walked, he had this cloud of dirt that would float around him. And Michelle described Greg's moods just like Pigpen's dirt cloud. It was this dark cloud that would kind of follow him around. You could practically see it. And then it seemed like it would somehow divide and form a second cloud. And that second cloud would creep over her. And then she'd have a cloud too. So he'd be nasty. She would get angry at him, take him on, challenge him, make it about her. She'd kind of take it personally, even though he was like that all day at work before he came home. She would take it personally. And she'd get charged up and get into her version of a bad mood. And then it would turn into a fight. So it looks like other people's moods are contagious and can bring you down. Because that scenario plays out for people. It looks like that's what happens. You're just standing there. They walk by and then there's this cloud. But here's what's interesting and why we say that negativity can't possibly be contagious. Because there's times when he has his mood and it doesn't affect her. So she could see while we were talking that depending on her own mood, when he would go sideways, sometimes she could see him trying to pick a fight and how unreasonable and irrational he was being. And it wasn't even tempting to her to get into his mess. It just looked like him. So sometimes she'd even start to get into it with him. She'd be going down that path and then realize, what am I doing? I don't want to do this. I know where this goes. This is his thing. So she would lose her own bearings, lose her own equilibrium, but then realize, wait a minute, and then she'd get it back, even though he's still doing his thing. So now where she really saw this was with her dad. So her dad would get really bummed out and down on things. That's kind of how he gets. So for example, she would book flights to come visit him. And she'd call him to give her, to tell him about the plans. And he'd say, well, I guess 3 days is all I'm going to get to see you. I guess it'll have to be enough. And when he got like that, which was actually a lot, she was always really good at not getting into it and just saying, yeah, Dad, I can't take off any more days off work, but we'll still have enough time to get in a good visit, and would just move on. Whereas her sister would either get into the guilt or get resentful that he doesn't appreciate her efforts, and everything's always got to be about him. And then she would have this cloud. Then she had a cloud over her head. The point is that every one of you out there listening to this has been the person that's kept their equilibrium when someone around them gets into one of their moods. Because by nature, every single human being is capable of having their equilibrium no matter what. So even if you lose your equilibrium every time your husband's around, but you handle your sister really well or your boss really well, the capability is there. You're using it. And it doesn't matter how often you use it, or that you can only use it with this person, or when you're in a really good mood yourself. It doesn't matter. You're using the capability of keeping your equilibrium or losing it and getting it back. You might have to really look for an example of when it appears, but if you look, the capability is there in you and shows up. And the knowing that capability is there is the key. So negativity isn't contagious. It just looks like that if we get into it ourselves. So when we get worked up or whipped around by another person's mood, that really has nothing to do with the other person. It's at that point, it's about us getting worked up about something, like taunting, like getting taunted. It's like when Michelle got worked up. In that moment, it just means Michelle is doing her version of a bad mood. She just lost her equilibrium exactly like Greg lost his. So what are the implications of what I'm saying? What does this mean for you? If you look at Michelle's sister and their dad, or professional athletes that get affected by taunting, people's minds don't handle things very well when they lose their bearings. We just don't operate at our best. Our minds and our thoughts don't work very well for us when we lose our bearings. When you look at Michelle's sister, there's a lot of wear and tear. And we don't really, on top of that, we don't really have good strategies for handling the challenge of somebody's bad moods when we're out of balance ourselves, when we're upset or frustrated. So Michelle didn't get put off by her dad, and she dealt with him more cleanly. She was still sweet to him, but only did what worked for her. She found her way through it a lot more easily and then just moved on with her day. Now, Michelle was just more proactive, less indulgent. She said what needed to be said. She handled it well. And she had no residue afterwards. She didn't resent him. She wasn't mad. There was nothing to get over. So just like an athlete who gets upset by the taunting, the coach knows that if I pull this guy out of the game for a few plays, he'll calm down. That's where the expression, get your head back in the game, that's what that means. As soon as an athlete calms down and pulls it together within their own minds, their thoughts naturally reorganize themselves and their performance goes up. It's true in every area of life. It's why timeouts work for kids. It's why companies will send their work teams out on retreats, because people do better. Our minds have this amazing intelligence that helps us handle all the people that we handle well in our lives that other people don't because they get frustrated. We have this, our minds are, we have amazing social skills and finesse with other people and a layer of protection from other people when we don't lose our own equilibrium. And that intelligence, gets obscured. We lose touch with that when we get upset, and then we don't handle anything well, and we have no protection. So in a way, you could say that we perform better in difficult social situations when we keep our own bearings. So when the people around us are in one of their moods, it really helps people to see that you don't have to go with them, and that we're smarter and wiser about how we handle them when we're able to keep our own bearings. Now, like I said earlier, all of you listening to this, you have some way of being that you get that makes you more challenging to be in a relationship with. And everyone in your life is challenging in some way. But there are certain people, you're just, for whatever reason, you're immune to their thing. Their thing doesn't get to you, like Michelle and her dad. That's the key, is you build, there's an immune system that you can have, and you can build it just like you can, the physical immune system. It won't matter when your physical immune system is stronger. It won't matter what's around you, the colds, if people have colds around you, if there's germs going around. Your physical immune system, if it's stronger, fewer and fewer people will get to you. And your mate, your significant other, your partner will get to you less, the stronger your immune system, so you don't have to change them. Now for us, that's all we do. We have a 4-day on-site program, or our online programs. That's all they do, is they build that immune system in people so they have resilience to bounce back faster or not get affected by what's happening in life or in other people. In fact, we have one specifically on relationships, if you want to go to our website and check it out, that will show you exactly what that looks like to get a stronger immune system so you get less affected by the people around you. See, all that happens is that people just get used to losing their bearings around certain people, around their spouses, teenagers, certain family members. They just get in certain patterns. The other person pushes their buttons, they react. The other person gets negative, they react. They just have their way. It's really just a habit. So because people get so used to reacting in a certain way, it can feel natural, normal, and unavoidable to lose your bearings around somebody's bad mood. So when it's happening to somebody else, like Michelle's sister, Michelle could see it was optional. To Michelle, it looked like an optional struggle. The times that you've kept your bearings or lost it and gotten it back, like Michelle with Greg, you can, once you realize, oh, what am I doing? I don't want to get into that with him. I know where that goes. At that moment, you can see the optionality of it, but not while you're in it. But when you come out of it, or if you're not the person going through it, now don't take my word for it. Go out this week and watch how someone who gets to you doesn't get to somebody else. You'll see everyone's affected differently by those people around them because we all have different thinking. So for everyone, when the people in our lives get into one of their moods and we take the what's their problem fork in the road, like Michelle did, all that's ever really happening is that they've gotten into their own spiral of upset or negativity. And it doesn't look like that came from inside of us. It looks like something that happened to us. But the truth is that people's thoughts, their minds, their own moods are completely separate than everybody else's. And there's ultimately a freedom that goes with that. Even though we lose sight of that freedom, there's a potential to keep your bearings or to lose your bearings and get it back. And that potential is there for all of us, no matter how often we're using it. Now, let me wrap this up by spelling out exactly what this means for you, and then I'll respond to a few of the more popular questions that we've gotten. So what I'm saying is that when you get whipped around by someone, when they're doing their thing and all of a sudden you're struggling too, for just a second, stop looking at them and look inside of you. How are you doing inside your own little world? What you'll probably see if you're like me or the rest of the people out there listening to this is that that other person is not really your biggest problem anymore. You are. You're your biggest problem the moment that you lose your bearings. Never mind the other person. If you look, you'll see. If you've gotten whipped around, it's because you've lost your own bearings. You've gotten upset, mad at them. You've gotten offended, frustrated, impatient, whatever. So in a way, I'm saying, number one, the biggest problem is that you've lost your bearings. That's the only real problem. They're not the problem anymore. It's your mind is creating more of a problem for you than their mind is. Two, it's the part of the equation that we have some influence over. We don't have influence over how they get or the fact that they're in that mood. So, and three, we already know how to handle it because we've been doing it all our lives. So once people realize they've lost their own bearings, they've gotten worked up about something, and they're clear enough to know that that's only making things worse, our perspective comes back. We kind of naturally reset, like the athlete who's gotten taken out of the game for a minute realizes, oh, they're doing their thing and I let it get to me. Your mind naturally resets. So seeing yourself and remembering to consider what's going on inside you is just a natural orientation that will come more easily to you as you really start playing around with what I'm saying when you leave this webinar. So you can catch it in the moment you're getting worked up, like Michelle. You can see it while it's happening. Or if you don't catch it then, which is most likely you'll see it later, not at the time, you can reflect back on the last 10 times your partner came home grouchy and you got defensive, whatever your pattern is. You'll see that every time you've gotten affected, you've ended up with a cloud over your head, it's only because of where you went within your own mind. And that's really the X factor. And the best part of it is, in truth, you have all the power because nobody can make you feel anything. So I'm going to take a couple of the questions that we've had come in. Now, the first question I'm going to answer is this. My wife gets frustrated with the kids and then will often end up exploding at me saying that I never help or I really don't care. She's even told me she doesn't mean it. She just gets stressed out and I'm right there. But if someone's attacking you and forcing you to engage, it's not really possible to keep your bearings, right? Or am I missing something? And that's a great question. Now, just to be clear, people can engage with someone who's upset or attacking them without getting upset themselves. Everyone out there has done that before. Someone's trying to bait you, get you into an argument, trying to push your buttons. you can keep your cool and stay neutral even while you're talking to them. That's what people call taking the high road or not stooping to their level. Whatever you call that, you can always keep your bearings inside of you, whether you're having to be part of the situation or not. Now, the other thing I want to point out here is that there's no right answer in terms of what to do when your partner is coming at you. Everyone's different. You have to learn about what works with your partner, just like your friends and your family, and your partner has had to figure out the best way to handle you when you're doing your thing. But it always comes back to you more than the other person. So we handle people better when we have our own bearings. So the less upset we get, we're smarter about how we handle the person attacking us, and we'll be able to make the call about the best approach for us and for them. Do I stay quiet? Do I leave the room? Do I just handle it head on, being direct, but staying as calm as I can? So when people are able to keep their own bearings, especially if someone's attacking them or coming at them or forcing them to engage, when we're able to keep our own bearings, we handle it in a way that at least is not making it worse, that keeps it from escalating too fast, that at the very least they're not adding to the situation and making things snowball out of control. And one other question that I want to get to that we get a lot. What makes my husband hard is that he's just checked out a lot of the time. When we're at home, he's working on the household projects. At night, he's watching TV. Even over dinner, I'll tell him about my day or I'll talk to him. He doesn't really seem interested. He's just kind of in his own world. He's always been sort of an extrovert, but he used to be more available. Now it's like I'm not even there, so I find myself spending more time with friends and doing my own thing more and more. And I don't like where this is going. Does what you've been saying apply to us? Now, this is another great question I really like, is that the thing is that what normally people do is they kind of focus on our relationship is going in a bad direction, and I can kind of see the cause in them. And really the only way to handle something like this is to find a different way of going about it within yourself. So what often happens if you have somebody who is withdrawn or who gets distracted, and you look inside their mate, you'll see that their mate will have a pattern of getting frustrated or bummed out or getting their feelings hurt or worrying about maybe they just don't like me anymore. And that's really what I want to focus on, is have you stop and take a look at, okay, well, where do I go with that? Have I stopped trying to get through to them? Do I shut down? Have I stopped putting myself into the relationship because it looks like what's the point? They're not interested anyway. That's where you have an influence, is whether you get discouraged, whether you get frustrated. So instead of just kind of, fine, he's not interested, I'll do my own thing, is to be able to reach out to them, even though maybe it takes them a while to reciprocate, or to find a way to not just go your own way because that seems to be the way that they're going. A lot of times, if somebody's kind of withdrawn and their mate gets their feelings hurt or gets frustrated and stops putting out, it gets cold because they're both doing that. Now, one of the things I want to stress in not just this response to this question, but in all three of these, is I am pointing to, never mind your mate, what's happening in you. You're in a way, the solution is on you, partly because you're the ones listening to this webinar, you're the ones looking for the help, but also not because your relationship, every problem is your problem. But what I'm saying, that if you're going to do something about it, how you're doing inside, how well you handle whatever challenges you have, even if it should be their problem. If anything that you're going to do to try to fix the problem, solve the problem, address the problem, is going to come down to whether you're acting out of frustration or impatience and spiraling yourself and making things worse, or whether you're able to get your head in a place where you can think more creatively, more neutrally, have some hope. That's what it's going to come down to, is how the spirit in which you handle the situation or the issue is going to decide whether you're successful or not. So if it's something that you can't see changing unless you do something about it, it's really going to help you to get out of your discouragement and frustration or taking it personally, and maybe getting stepping away from the situation and getting kind of a new vision for how to handle it, or to get some hope, or find your patience, or whatever inspires you, is to go about it in a spirit in which you're more likely to find solutions the way that you would go about a solution at work. So that's the common denominator in all of these questions, is to stop looking at the problem and looking at them and get back to, all right, how am I doing, and do I need to get my head back in the game?